A Jewish believer and a Gentile believer are sitting across a low table in a house on the Aventine Hill. Bread between them. Neither one is sure who's allowed to break it first. 2,000 years later, you open an email from your church and read a sentence about all have sinned. You feel mildly inspired and you move on with your day. Paul wrote that sentence at them, not at you. Yet. The room he is aiming at is specific. The fight he is ending is specific. And when you hear who was in that room, the verse you thought you knew starts doing something else entirely. Romans chapter 3, verse 23 and 24. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. That is a verse you've probably had memorized since someone made you memorize it. You can say it without thinking. That's the problem. Paul wrote it so it couldn't be said without thinking. Let me back up to the room. It's AD 57-ish. Paul is in Corinth, about to mail a letter to a city he has never set foot in. The Roman Church has a scar nobody in our version of Christianity carries anymore. 8 years before this, the Emperor Claudius expelled every Jew from the city of Rome. Every Jewish believer, too. Gone. And for roughly 5 years, the house churches in Rome ran without a single Jewish voice in them. Gentile leadership, Gentile assumptions, Gentile table. Then Claudius dies. Nero lets the Jews come back, and the Jewish believers walk into their own churches and find a congregation that has reorganized itself without them and doesn't feel any particular obligation to the Torah they've kept their whole lives. 2 groups, 1 room, and a very quiet fight about whose framework actually defines what's happening at the table. That is the room Paul is writing to. Romans is not an abstract theology textbook. It's a pastoral intervention aimed at a specific fracture. So why am I telling you all that? Because the sentence is the whole argument of the letter compressed into one breath. Follow me for a second. The sentence is a chiasm. The middle is where the argument actually lives. On one side, you've got all sinned. On the other side, you've got justified as a gift. And the middle, the hinge between them, is the verb tense shift that English translations cannot carry and do not try to. The word for sinned is in the aorist. That's a past tense verdict. Finished. A jury walks in, reads the decision, walks out. That's aorist. Not ongoing, rendered. But right next to it, the phrase fall short of the glory of God, that verb is in the present. Ongoing, continuous, happening right now while you're listening to this. So Paul is doing something in one sentence that English flattens into one tense. He is saying the verdict is closed and the deficit is open. You don't live your life trying to avoid a guilty ruling. The ruling already came in. You live your life inside it. And that shifts where your religious energy goes. It stops going toward preventing a verdict because the verdict is already in. And it starts going towards something much harder to name. Which brings me to the word I actually want to sit with. Dōrean. Every English Bible you have ever owned translates this word as freely or as a gift. The KJV says freely, the ESV and the NIV say as a gift. They're trying, but the English is doing something the Greek refuses to do. I'm going to try to say this and probably get it wrong the first time, so stay with me. Dōrean shows up in one other place that tells you exactly what it means. In John chapter 15, Jesus quotes a psalm and says, "They hated me, Dōrean." Same word. And there it's translated without cause. They hated me without cause. No reason upstream. No provocation. Causeless hate. That is the word Paul just used for how God justifies you. Not generously. Not extravagantly. Not mercifully even. Causelessly. There is nothing in you that triggered it, and there is nothing you can do after the fact that pays it back. If you can point to something, a prayer you prayed, a moment you gave in, a stretch of discipline, an honest confession, and you believe that is what made the gift available, you have not yet heard the word. The translators aren't lying. They're just short on vocabulary. English has no word that holds free and gift and without cause in the same breath. Pick one, you lose the others. Freely drifts toward generous. As a gift sounds like something you can be worthy of. Without cause sounds accusatory. So every English Bible picks the softest of the three and hopes you'll read the footnote. You're probably not reading the footnote. Most of us aren't. So here is what you've been reading for however many years of your life. Justified freely by his grace. Warm, kind, extravagant, comforting. And here is what Paul actually wrote. Justified without cause by his grace. Disorienting, vertigo-inducing, a category Rome didn't have. Because Rome ran on patronage. Every gift came with an invisible string. Do ut des. I give so that you will give. The client owed the patron political support, public honor, lifelong loyalty. There was no such thing as a gift that didn't obligate you back. A gift without reciprocal obligation was not a category a first-century Roman had available to them. And Paul dropped that word into the middle of a sentence they could not unhear. Okay, I have to stop the analysis for a second and say what I think this actually does to a person.
It's the stretch of late March into early April, the couple of weeks right before Easter. Every church you've ever been in is gearing up for the services. And you're looking at the calendar and you're doing the math that people do in that stretch. You're counting how many Sundays you went this year. You're thinking about the Lent thing you didn't stick with. You're thinking about the person you still haven't called back. And underneath all of that, there's this low hum that says, I should be more by now. I should have moved further by now. I should be a different kind of Christian by this point in my life. That hum is not the gospel. That hum is the patronage economy. That hum is your brain running a running tally of what you owe for the gift you've already received and trying to figure out whether your current rate of payment is keeping you current. Dōrean demolishes the tally. Not softens it. Demolishes it. There was no invoice. There is no invoice. The reason you feel like you owe something is that the word for gift you have been handed has been emotionally mistranslated your whole life. Here's the second picture. There is a manila envelope somewhere in your house. In a filing cabinet, in a desk drawer, in a box on a closet shelf. In that envelope, there is a piece of paper that matters. A diploma, a deed, a certificate. Something signed by a person with authority on a day you can remember that says something about you is settled. You don't open that envelope every week to check if the paper is still in there. You don't run your finger down the signature to make sure the ink hasn't faded. The paper exists. Somebody with the authority to sign it signed it. The fact of the paper isn't a feeling.
The verdict in Romans 3:24 is that paper. The judge, the only judge whose ruling actually matters, signed it. It lives in the envelope. And most of us spend our Christian lives opening the envelope every 3 days because we cannot quite believe it's still in there. The tally you're running in your head before Easter, am I a good enough Christian this year, is you checking the envelope again. The quiet comparison you're running against the believer 2 pews over who seems to have it more together than you, that's checking the envelope.
The part of you that can't let yourself rest after a hard conversation because you said something sharp and now you're wondering if you're still on the hook. Envelope. 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 And what Paul is trying to tell the Jewish believer and the Gentile believer on opposite sides of the same house church is your envelope and their envelope were signed by the same judge, in the same hand, with the same word. Dōrean. There is no tier. There is no first-class envelope and second-class envelope. There is no one who got theirs because they earned it and no one who got theirs because they were lucky. The floor is the same. The ceiling is the same. Whatever you have been using to rank yourself above someone else or below someone else is a tier Paul just dismantled in a single sentence. I don't know what to do with this some days. That's honest. I know the verse. I've known the verse for a long time. But walking around inside the verse, actually operating as if the envelope is already signed, as if the tally is a fiction, as if the person I'm quietly ranking myself against received the same causeless gift, that's a different thing from knowing the verse.
There's a woman I know, retired now, who has been going to the same church for about 40 years. She sits near the back. She doesn't say a lot. If you asked her to articulate the doctrine of justification, she'd probably get shy and tell you to talk to the pastor. But I watched her last fall at a funeral. A young man in the congregation had died suddenly, and his parents were destroyed. And the reception afterward was the kind of reception where nobody knows what to do with their hands. And she just walked over to the mother, sat down in the folding chair next to her, and didn't say anything for probably 20 minutes. Just sat there, hand on her arm. No performance, no fix, no verse dispensed. I don't think she was thinking about patronage economy. I don't think she was thinking about the aorist tense of hamarton. But something in her, after 40 years, had believed the envelope long enough that she could walk over to a grieving mother without needing that mother to be anything in particular first. No tear, no cause, nothing the mother had to bring to the chair to be worth sitting next to. That's the shape of a person who has actually heard the word Dōrean. No tear, same envelope.